I drove 4 hours into the mountains, desperate for silence, but I found my sanctuary gutted. My sister hadn't just broken into my cabin. She had moved in and authorized a full-scale renovation without asking. As I stared at the demolished kitchen, the real betrayal hit me harder than the dust in the air. She did not just steal my home, she was paying for the destruction using my own bank account, and she actually expected me to thank her for it. The drive from Seattle to Pinevale Ridge was not a journey I undertook lightly. It was a pilgrimage. It took 2 full days of driving, watching the gray drizzle of the Pacific Northwest bleed into the high deserts of Idaho and Utah, before finally giving way to the jagged, imposing silhouette of the Rockies. I had spent the last 6 months as a product manager for a tech firm that seemed determined to wring every ounce of cognitive function out of my brain. And I was empty. I was a husk. The only thing propelling me forward was the promise of silence. My cabin was supposed to be the finish line. I had bought it 3 years ago, a dilapidated A-frame sitting on 2 acres of scrub pine and granite, paid for with the savings I had scraped together after a breakup that nearly destroyed me. I had rebuilt it, board by board, weekend by weekend. It was the only place on earth where I did not have to answer emails, manage expectations, or apologize for existing. It was mine. By the time I turned off the main highway and onto the gravel switchbacks leading up the ridge, the sun had already dipped behind the peaks, casting the valley in a bruising shade of purple. The snowpack was heavy this year. I shifted my truck into 4-wheel drive. Feeling the tires bite into the hard-packed powder, I rolled my neck, hearing the vertebrae pop, and fantasized about the temperature inside. I had a smart thermostat, but the internet connection up here was spotty, so I expected it to be freezing. I would build a fire. I would pour a glass of bourbon. I would sit in the dark and listen to the wind. That was the plan. But as I rounded the final bend, the headlights of my truck swept across the front of the cabin, and my stomach dropped so hard I nearly hit the brake pedal. There were lights on, not just a safety light, but every light. The warm glow of the living room spilled out onto the snow, illuminating the front deck. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, rising into the twilight. For a terrifying second, I thought I had been robbed. Squatters, teenagers looking for a party spot. My hand went to the heavy flashlight in the door panel, a defensive instinct flaring up. Then I saw the car. It was parked haphazardly near the woodpile, blocking part of the turnaround. A white SUV, salt-stained and familiar. Marla. I stopped my truck, the engine idling in the silence of the mountain air. My older sister lived in Denver, 4 hours away. She did not have a key, or at least, I had never given her one. I stared at the house, my sanctuary, and felt a prickle of irritation slide under my skin. I took a deep breath, trying to summon the patience that had been drilled into me since childhood. She is family. I told myself, she probably just wanted to surprise you. I killed the engine and stepped out. The cold air hit me like a slap, sharp and clean, smelling of pine needles and wood smoke. But there was another sound, something that didn't belong here. Cling-clang, ting-ting. I looked up, hanging from the eaves of my front porch, right where I usually kept my bird feeder, was a set of massive metallic wind chimes. They were garish, sounding like cheap church bells in the breeze. I had never bought them. I hated wind chimes. They ruined the natural silence. I walked up the steps, my boots crunching loudly on the snow, hoping the sound would announce me. It didn't. I reached for the door handle, but it was locked. I used my key, the metal turning smoothly, and pushed the door open. Heat blasted me in the face, carrying the scent of vanilla and roasted garlic. It didn't smell like my house. My house smelled of cedar and old books. This smelled like a candle shop. "Hello?" I called out, my voice cracking slightly from hours of disuse. There was a clatter from the kitchen area, and then Marla appeared in the hallway. She was wearing one of my oversized flannels, one I kept strictly for chopping wood, over a pair of expensive yoga leggings. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she was holding a glass of red wine. "Ellie," she squealed the name, rushing forward to wrap me in a hug before I could even drop my duffel bag. "You made it. I was worried you would get stuck in the pass." I stood stiffly in her embrace, the physical contact jarring after days of solitude. I pulled back gently, looking her in the eye. "Marla," I said, "what are you doing her?" She laughed, a bright, brittle sound that bounced off the vaulted ceiling. "I am taking care of the place. I knew you were coming down, and I thought, surely she does not want to walk into a cold house. Look, I made a roast." I looked past her into the living room. It was not just the smell or the temperature, the room felt different. My throw blankets, usually folded in a basket, were draped artistically over the furniture. There were new pillows on the couch, bright yellow geometric patterns that clashed with the rustic leather. On the refrigerator, visible from the entryway, was a large poster board covered in magazine cutouts. I stepped out of my boots, my socks sliding on the hardwood. Marla followed me, buzzing with an energy I couldn't quite place. "I did not know you were coming," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. "How did you get in?" "Oh, the hide key," she said dismissively, waving a hand. "The one under the planter. I moved that key 2 years ago." I said. She blinked, her smile faltering for a microsecond before returning to full wattage. "Well, I remembered the code to the garage keypad. It took a few tries, but I got in." Sister telepathy. Right. I walked into the kitchen, or at least, towards it. The open concept living area flowed into the dining space, but as I rounded the corner, I stopped dead. The kitchen island was covered in boxes, not grocery boxes, shipping boxes. I stepped closer, reading the labels. Summit Peak Home Supply. There were 4 of them, large and heavy, stacked like a barricade. Beside them sat a fan of paint chips spread out on the counter. The colors were stark whites and cool grays. The label on the top card read, "Modern Alpine." "Marla," I said, pointing at the boxes. "What is this?" She took a sip of her wine, leaning against the door frame casually. "Oh, do not worry about that. Just some ideas. I have been doing a little nesting." "Nesting," I repeated. "Marla, this is my house. I know, she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "But listen, Ellie, things with Derek are bad." I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since I walked in, beneath the manic energy. She looked tired. The lines around her eyes were tight. "We are separated," she said, the word hanging heavy in the air. "He asked me to leave on Tuesday. I didn't know where else to go. I just needed a safe place, a place to think, and I thought, Ellie is never using the cabin in the winter anyway." I felt the familiar tug in my chest, the heavy anchor of obligation. Marla was 3 years older than me, but somehow I had always been the big sister. I was the one who balanced the checkbooks, the one who remembered Mother's Day, the one who cleaned up the messes. "I am sorry," I said, softening. "I did not know." "It is okay," she said, sniffing dramatically. "I am just glad you are here now. We can have a girls' weekend, just like when we were kids." She walked over to the fridge and tapped the poster board I had seen earlier. "I have been making a vision board," she said, "for the new me, and for the cabin. It has so much potential. Ellie, it just needs a little refreshing." I stepped closer to the fridge. The board was covered in pictures of high-end kitchens, marble countertops, gold fixtures, open shelving. "Marla," I said slowly, "I like the cabin the way it is." She laughed again, swatting my arm playfully. "You like it because you are used to it. But look at this." She gestured toward the sink area. My eyes followed her hand, and the breath hitched in my throat. The cabinet doors under the sink were gone. I don't mean they were open. I mean they were unscrewed and removed. The hinges were bare metal. Inside, the plumbing trap was exposed, a white plastic U-bend stark against the darkness of the cabinet. "Marla," I said, my voice rising, "where are my cabinet doors?" "Oh, the contractor took them," she said easily, "to match the paint." "Contractor?" The word echoed in the silence of the room. I turned to look at the counter again. Lying next to the paint chips was a small, glossy business card. I picked it up. Northline Renovations, LLC, Caleb Rusk, General Contractor. You hired a contractor. I said, the sentence was not a question. It was a statement of disbelief. I have not hired him. Technically, she said, rushing the words. He just came by for a consult. He said the wood in here is dated. Ellie, it makes the space look small. He suggested we paint the lowers a charcoal gray and do open shelving on top. It would open everything up. I looked at the missing doors. He took parts of my house, Marla, without my permission. It is just a sample match, she said, her eyes widening with feigned innocence. I thought you would be happy I'm taking care of things. You are always so busy with work. I wanted to help. I stared at the exposed plumbing. The dust on the floor was not just dirt. It was sawdust. Fine, yellow pine dust. I looked at the backsplash. There was blue painter's tape running along the edge of the granite. This is not a consult. I said, this is prep work. Marla sighed, putting her wine glass down on a coaster that I definitely did not own. You are overreacting. It is just a few little upgrades. I was going to surprise you. Surprise me, I said, with a renovation I did not ask for. With a refresh. She corrected. And do not worry about the money. I am handling it. I looked at her. Marla had worked sporadically as a yoga instructor and a lifestyle consultant for the past decade. Her husband, Derek, was a successful insurance broker. If they were separated, I doubted she had access to liquid cash for a kitchen remodel. How are you handling it? I asked. I have savings, she said, looking away. And I'm going to start some new projects. It is all part of the vision. I rubbed my temples. The headache I had brought from Seattle was throbbing behind my eyes. I was too tired to fight this tonight. I needed to sleep. I needed to process the fact that my sister was living in my house and dismantling my kitchen. We will talk about this tomorrow. I said firmly, no more work. Tell the contractor to bring the doors back. Ellie, she started, a whine creeping into her tone. No, I said, I mean it. I came here to rest. Marla, not to manage a construction site. Fine, she said, pouting like a teenager. Be a grump. I made dinner. By the way, I ate the roast she made. It was over-salted. We made small talk about our mother, about the weather, avoiding the gaping hole in the kitchen cabinetry like it was a physical wound. I went to bed early, retreating to the master bedroom in the loft. At least she hadn't touched my room. The bed was made with my linens. The air was cold and still. I crawled under the quilt, burying my face in the pillow, hoping to wake up and find out the missing doors were a hallucination brought on by highway hypnosis. I drifted into a restless sleep, but it didn't last. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I groaned, rolling over to check the time. It was 2 a.m. The screen was blindingly bright in the darkness. I squinted at the notification. It was a text from my bank. Chase fraud alert. Did you authorize a charge of $4,500 at Northline Renovations, LLC, on January 27th? Reply, yes or no. I sat up, the quilt falling away from my shoulders. The cold air rushed in, but I didn't feel it. My blood had turned to ice. $4,500. That was not a consult fee. That was a deposit. I unlocked my phone and opened the banking app. My fingers were trembling slightly. I navigated to my checking account. The charge was pending. Northline Reno. Deposit. I scrolled down. 3 days ago. Pinevale Hardware. $240. 4 days ago. Summit Peak Home. $890. 5 days ago. Martin's Disposal. $150. There were dozens of them. Small charges. $50 here. $100 there. Gas station charges. Grocery runs. Liquor store purchases. All on my debit card. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. How did she have my card? I had it in my wallet. I checked my wallet on the nightstand. It was there. Then I remembered. 6 months ago, when Marla visited me in Seattle, we had gone out for a birthday dinner. I had paid. She had asked to use my phone to look up a restaurant menu because hers was dead. I had unlocked it and handed it to her. She must have added herself to my digital wallet. Or maybe she had found the old shared payment app we used to use for Mom's birthday gifts, the one I hadn't checked in years but was still linked to my primary checking account. I got out of bed, pulling on my robe. I needed to see. I needed to know. I crept downstairs. The cabin was silent, save for the ticking of the settling wood. The wind chimes outside clattered softly, a mocking sound. I went to the kitchen, in the moonlight. The missing cabinet doors looked like missing teeth. I turned on the flashlight on my phone and shined it into the recycling bin by the back door. It was full. Empty wine bottles, takeout containers, and receipts. I pulled one out. It was from the hardware store. Caleb Rusk / Job, Griffin, Job, Griffin, not Job, Harlan, not Job, Marla, Job, Griffin. She was using my name. I moved to the living room, where Marla had left her laptop open on the coffee table. I didn't want to snoop, but I had $4,000 pending on a renovation I didn't authorize. I tapped the space bar. The screen lit up. It wasn't password protected. It was open to an email thread. The subject line read, Kitchen Authorization, Griffin Cabin. I read the top email, sent from an address I didn't recognize. ellieggriffindesigns@email.com. Hey Caleb. Super excited to get started. The deposit should be going through tonight. Marla will be on site to manage everything since I'm stuck in Seattle, but she has my full proxy. Let's get those ugly oak cabinets out of there. Emoji heart. Emoji sparkle. I felt sick, physically sick. The email was signed Ellie. I would never write that. I never used emojis in business emails. I never called my cabinets ugly. She had created a fake email account. She was impersonating me. I heard a floorboard creak upstairs. I shut the laptop and stood up, my heart hammering against my ribs. Ellie. Marla was standing at the top of the stairs, a shadow in the darkness. "What are you doing?" she asked. Her voice was thick with sleep, but there was an edge to it, a sharpness. I held up my phone. I just got a fraud alert. I said, my voice was steady, terrifyingly calm. For $4,500 to Northline Renovations. Marla walked down the stairs, pulling her robe tighter around herself. "Oh," she said. Yes. I said. "Why is my card being charged for a contractor I did not hire?" She reached the bottom of the stairs and flipped on the hallway light. The sudden brightness made me wince. "It is just a hold," she said, waving her hand as if swatting away a fly. Caleb needed a deposit to secure the materials. I was going to transfer the money to you tomorrow. I told you. I am handling it. You used my money. Marla. I said, you used my bank account, and I saw the email, the fake email. She froze. The casual, sleepy demeanor evaporated. Her face hardened. You were snooping on my computer. I am snooping in my house. I snapped. You are impersonating me. Marla. That is fraud. Her eyes filled with tears. Instant and weaponized. I am not impersonating you, she cried. I am helping you. You are so ungrateful. I come up here, into the middle of nowhere, to fix up this dump for you, and you treat me like a criminal. You forged my consent, I said, refusing to back down. You are spending thousands of dollars of my money. I was going to pay you back, she screamed. Why do you always have to make everything about money? You have so much of it. You have the big job in Seattle, the stock options, the perfect life, and I have nothing. Ellie, my husband left me. I have nowhere to go, and you are worried about a deposit. She sank onto the bottom step, burying her face in her hands, sobbing. It was a performance I had seen 1,000 times. When we were 10, and she broke Mom's vase, she cried until I admitted to doing it just to make the noise stop. When we were 20, and she stole my ID to get into a club. She cried about how lonely she was until I apologized for being angry. You always leave me alone, she sobbed. You went to college and left me. You moved to Seattle and left me. And now I try to do one nice thing, one thing to make this place a home for both of us. And you want to call the police? I stood there, watching her shake, a part of me, the trained part, wanted to go to her, to hug her, to say it was okay, that we would figure it out. But I looked at the kitchen. I looked at the dark holes where my cabinets used to be. This wasn't a broken vase. This was my life. I took a step back. "Stop the work," I said quietly. She looked up, her face blotchy and red. "What?" "Call the contractor." I said, "Cancel the job. I want the money returned, and I want you to give me the login to that email account." She stared at me, her mouth open in shock. "You can't cancel it. He already ordered the materials. They are custom. Then unorder them." I said. I turned and walked back toward the guest room. "Ellie!" she shouted after me. "Ellie, do not walk away from me." I closed the door and locked it. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands shaking. I could hear her downstairs, pacing, talking to herself, or maybe on the phone. I looked at the bank alert on my screen. Reply yes or no. I did not reply, not yet. If I replied no, the bank would freeze everything. They would launch an investigation. It would become a legal matter immediately. Marla would be flagged for fraud. If I replied yes, I was accepting the debt. I was letting her win. I put the phone down. I needed evidence. I grabbed my notebook from my bag. I was a product manager. I managed chaos for a living. I tracked bugs. I documented feature creeps. I opened a fresh page. January 28th. 1. Unauthorized entry. 2. Unauthorized modifications to property. Kitchen cabinets removed. 3. Discovery of unapproved contractor, Northline. 4. Financial discrepancy. Approximately $5,000 charged to personal accounts. 5. Impersonation. Creation of fake email alias. I wrote it all down, every detail. Every time she claimed she was helping, I realized then, sitting in the cold dark of my own house, that Marla hadn't just moved in. She was trying to displace me. She was rewriting the narrative of my life, editing me out of the ownership role and casting me as the silent financier. She thought I would roll over. She thought I would be too afraid of rocking the boat, too afraid of being the bad sister to stop her. She was wrong. I picked up my phone again and opened the camera roll. I started taking pictures of the room, the condition of the walls, the time on the clock. Tomorrow, I would photograph the kitchen. I would screenshot the emails. I would download the bank statements. I would not scream. I would not cry. I would not give her the emotional reaction she was feeding on. I would be a wall, a cold, hard, granite wall. I lay back down, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind chimes clanking on the porch. Cling-clang. They had to go. They were the first thing I was going to take down in the morning. Marla was still moving downstairs, heavy footsteps dragging across the floor. She was probably drinking another glass of wine, stewing in her victimhood, planning her next move. I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. I waited for the sun. I waited for the war to begin. The morning light was gray and harsh. It filtered through the blinds, stripping away the cozy illusion of the cabin and revealing the dust motes dancing in the air. I dressed in layers, thermal leggings, heavy wool socks, a fleece sweater. I needed to feel armored. When I went downstairs, Marla was asleep on the couch, wrapped in one of my throws. The empty wine bottle sat on the floor. I stepped over it and went into the kitchen. In the daylight, it was worse. The counters were covered in a fine layer of grit. The backsplash tile had been chipped where someone, presumably the contractor, had pried at it. I took out my phone. Click, photo of the missing doors. Click, photo of the chipped tile. Click, photo of the boxes from Summit Peak Home Supply. I walked to the boxes and looked at the shipping label. Ship to Ellie Griffin. Care of Marla Harlan. She had used my name as the primary, but routed it to herself. I took a picture of the label. I went to the front door and opened it. The cold air rushed in, purging the stale smell of wine and construction dust. I reached up and unhooked the wind chimes. They were heavy, cheap metal. I walked to the side of the porch and set them down on the woodpile. Then I saw the tire tracks again. In the light, I could see they weren't just from Marla's car. There were heavier tracks. Dual tires. A truck. The contractor had been here recently, maybe yesterday. I walked down the driveway a bit, looking at the snow. There was something sticking out of the drift near the mailbox. I pulled it out. It was a stake, a yard sign. Coming soon. Another transformation by Northline Renovations. She had let them put a sign up. On my property. I pulled the sign out of the snow. It made a sucking sound as the frozen earth let go. I carried it back to the house, the metal legs cold in my hand. I walked back inside. Marla was stirring. She sat up, rubbing her eyes. Her makeup smeared. "Ellie," she groaned. "What time is it?" "It is 8 a.m, I said. I held up the yard sign. "Why is this in my yard?" She squinted at it, then flopped back onto the pillows. "Oh, Caleb asked if he could put it up for a discount on the labor. It is just advertising." "Ellie, it saves us $500. It saves us nothing," I said, "because we are not hiring him." I walked to the kitchen and leaned the sign against the island, right next to the Northline business card. "I'm going into town," I said. "I am going to the bank, and then I am going to the permit office." Marla sat up straight, panic flaring in her eyes. "Why are you going to the permit office?" "Because you are moving plumbing," I said, pointing to the sink. "And if you are moving plumbing without a permit in Pinevale Ridge, the fine is triple the cost of the work." "I did not move plumbing," she stammered. "He just disconnected it. I am going to check," I said. I grabbed my keys. "Ellie, wait," she said, scrambling off the couch. "You can't just go down there and start asking questions. You will get Caleb in trouble." I turned at the door. "That is not my problem." "Marla." I walked out. As I started my truck, I saw her watching me from the window. She was on her phone again, talking fast, waving her free hand. I backed out of the driveway, the tires spinning slightly on the ice before catching traction. I drove down the mountain, leaving the silence behind. I had come here to rebuild myself. Instead, I was going to have to fight for the ruins. I tapped the steering wheel, the rhythm anxious and staccato. 1, freeze the card. 2, get the bank statements. 3, check the permits. I was a product manager. I would manage this product, even if the product was my own sister's betrayal. I reached the bottom of the switchbacks and turned onto the county road. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. It was a text from Marla. "I just want you to be happy. Why are you punishing me for trying to help?" I didn't reply. I kept driving. The mountains rose up around me, silent and indifferent. They didn't care about sisters or kitchens or money. They just endured. I would have to do the same. I checked my rearview mirror. No one was following me, just the empty road and the swirling snow. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I had already lost something I would never get back. Not the money, not the cabinets, the trust. It was gone, demolished as surely as my kitchen. And unlike the cabinets, I didn't think I could order a replacement. I turned onto Main Street, Pinevale Ridge. The town was waking up. The bakery was open. The plow trucks were rumbling. I pulled into the parking lot of the local bank branch. I took a deep breath. Showtime. I turned off the truck and stepped out into the cold. The wind bit at my cheeks. I walked toward the glass doors, my boots loud on the pavement. Inside, a teller looked up and smiled. "Good morning," she said. "How can I help you today?" I walked to the counter, pulling my ID out of my wallet. "My name is Ellie Griffin," I said, "and I need to report a theft." The teller's smile faltered. "Oh," she said, "did you lose your card?" "No," I said, my voice steady, my eyes hard. "I know exactly who has it." I got back into my truck and looked at the stack of papers. The top line caught my eye. January 2nd, the day after New Year's. She hadn't just come here when she got separated. She had been planning this for a month. I felt a cold chill that had nothing to do with the weather. She had lied about everything. I put the truck in gear. Next stop, the permit office. I was going to burn her narrative to the ground, and I was going to use her own paper trail to do it. I drove toward the town hall, the tires crunching on the snow, the sound rhythmic and relentless, like a clock ticking down, like a bomb waiting to go off. I was the bomb, and Marla had just lit the fuse. I sat in the cab of my truck, the engine idling to keep the heater running, while the bank teller's printer noise still echoed in my ears. I had the stack of transaction records on the passenger seat, a physical weight pressing down on the leather upholstery. I picked up my phone and dialed the number on the back of my debit card. The automated voice was cheerful, a stark contrast to the hollow feeling in my chest. I navigated the menu with aggressive stabs of my finger. Report lost or stolen, freeze card, speak to a representative. When a human finally answered, I was calm. It was the icy, detached calm of a product manager dealing with a critical system failure. I verified my identity. I explained the unauthorized charges. I asked them to freeze the card immediately and flag the merchant Northline renovations. But as the representative typed on the other end, confirming the freeze, she paused. Ms. Griffin, she said, I see the card is frozen now. However, I want to confirm that you are aware of the other transfer method being used. My hand tightened on the steering wheel. Other method. Yes, she continued. Several of the larger transactions, specifically the ones to local vendors in Pinevale Ridge, were not processed through the debit card directly. They were initiated through a linked payment app, CashLink. It is tied to your primary checking account via routing number, not the card number. I felt the blood drain from my face. CashLink. I hadn't used that app in 5 years. Marla and I had set up a shared login when we planned a surprise anniversary party for our parents. We used it to pool money for the venue deposit. I had completely forgotten it existed. I had forgotten the password. I had forgotten it was still live. But Marla hadn't. She had the old login. She knew the account was verified. By using the app, she bypassed the daily spending limits on my debit card. She had a direct pipeline into my life savings, and because the account was technically shared, the bank's fraud algorithms hadn't flagged it immediately. It was not just impulsive spending, it was archaeological. She had dug through the strata of our past to find a back door into my finances. Freeze it, I said, my voice sounding distant. Sever the link. Block the app. I hung up and stared at the dashboard. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. This was a siege. I put the truck in gear and pulled out of the bank parking lot. I needed to go to the permit office. I needed to see how deep the rot went. The Pinevale Ridge permit office was located in the basement of the town hall. A brick building that smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. I walked down the stairs, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. There was one clerk behind the counter. A woman with gray hair cut in a sensible bob, wearing a name tag that read a Janice. I approached the counter, trying to look less like a woman on the verge of a breakdown and more like a responsible homeowner. Hi, I said. I am Ellie Griffin. I own the property on Granite Creek Road. I wanted to check if any permits have been pulled for a kitchen renovation recently. Janice looked up over her reading glasses. She squinted at me, then typed slowly into her computer. Griffin, she muttered. Granite Creek. Yes, we have an inquiry on file from last week. Inquiry. I repeated. Not a permit. Not yet, she said. The application forms were picked up, but they have not been filed. But there is a note here about a consult regarding gas line relocation. Gas line. I felt a spike of adrenaline. My cabin was electric. Installing a gas range would mean running a line from the propane tank outside, drilling through the foundation. Who made the inquiry? I asked. Janice turned the screen slightly. Though I couldn't read it. It says the homeowner. Ellie Griffin. I stared at her. I am Ellie Griffin, and I did not make the inquiry. Janice looked at me, then back at the screen. She frowned. Well, a woman came in last Tuesday. She said she was Ellie Griffin. She had the folio number and the plot map printed out. I closed my eyes for a second. Marla, what did she look like? I asked. Janice shrugged. About your height, blonde hair, but lighter, dressed nice, very confident. She talked a lot. What did she talk about? I asked. Janice chuckled dryly. She went on and on about content creation, said the kitchen needed better lighting for her videos. She asked if she needed a permit to install a commercial-grade range for a cooking show. A cooking show. I felt a wave of nausea. Marla didn't cook. Marla ordered takeout and plated it nicely. Did she leave an email address? I asked. Janice nodded. Yes. We sent the digital packet to it. elliegriffin88@email.com. I gripped the edge of the counter. Ellie Griffin, 88. That was my screen name in high school. I hadn't used it in 15 years. Marla had resurrected my teenage ghost to commit fraud. Thank you. Janice, I said, I need you to note on the file that no work is authorized. I am the only Ellie Griffin, and I am not renovating. Janice looked concerned now. She handed me a business card. You might want to lock that down. Honey, if she has the folio number, she can do a lot of damage. I took the card. I walked out of the basement, my boots heavy on the stairs. Marla wasn't just staying in my house. She was wearing my identity like a costume. The drive back up the mountain was a blur of white snow and black anger. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw Marla's car still parked haphazardly by the woodpile. The wind chimes I had taken down were gone from where I left them. I looked up. She had rehung them. The audacity was so pure, so absolute, it was almost impressive. I stormed into the house. Marla was in the living room, sitting on the floor surrounded by fabric swatches. She looked up, smiling as if nothing had happened the night before. Ellie, look! I found these vintage curtains online. They would look amazing with the new paint. I didn't smile. I walked over to the kitchen island and slammed the stack of bank statements down on the granite. The sound was like a gunshot. Marla flinched. We need to talk. I said, now. She stood up, brushing lint off her leggings. You are so intense today. Did you get coffee? I know about CashLink. Marla, I said, I know you used our old shared login to bypass my card limits. I know you went to the permit office pretending to be me. I know you are using my high school email handle. Marla's face went blank. The smile didn't just fade. It fell off. I did not pretend to be you, she said, her voice taking on that defensive, wine-pitched tone I knew so well. I am acting as your proxy. It is a legal term. Ellie, it is not a legal term when you do not have my permission. I snapped. It is identity theft. She rolled her eyes. You are so dramatic. I told you, I am doing this for us. For the investment. What investment? I asked. You are unemployed? Marla, you are separated. You have no money. You are spending my money. She walked over to the fridge and tapped the vision board again. It is not just a house. Ellie, it is a platform. She pulled her phone out and opened an app I didn't recognize. She shoved the screen in my face. Cabin Nest Rentals, she said. It is the new Airbnb, but for influencers, high-end, aesthetic properties. I already created a profile for the cabin. I looked at the screen. There was a photo of my living room, my sanctuary, with a filter that made it look brighter, faker. The listing title read, The Pinevale Retreat, a luxury content oasis. Marla, I said, my voice shaking. I do not want to rent my house. I live here. You live in Seattle, she countered. You come here maybe 4 times a year. It is a waste. Ellie, it is selfish. Do you know how much this place could make? $300 a night, maybe $400 if we get the kitchen done. She started pacing, her hands moving wildly. I have a plan, she said. I am going to manage it. I will live here, handle the bookings, do the cleaning. I will take a management fee, and the rest goes to you. You will make back the renovation costs in 6 months. It is passive income. Ellie, I'm giving you a business. I stared at her. She actually believed it. She had convinced herself that stealing my money and gutting my house was a favor. I don't want a business. I said clearly, I want my home. Marla stopped pacing. She looked at me with pity. That is your problem. Ellie, you think small. You settle. Derek used to say that about you. That you are afraid of success. The mention of her husband, her estranged husband, stung. Don't bring Derek into this. I said, I am just saying, she said, softening her voice to a manipulative purr. I am trying to help you level up. This kitchen, it is depressing. It is dark. It is not content-friendly. I stepped closer to her. Stop, I said. Just stop. I took a breath. I needed to be clear. I needed to be the wall. Here is what is going to happen. I said, you are going to stop all work. You are going to give me my spare keys. You are going to return every item you bought that can be returned, And you are going to pay me back every single dollar you spent. Marla stared at me. And, I added, you are going to leave. Leave, she repeated. Yes, you can stay tonight because I am not a monster, but tomorrow. You are packing your car and you are going back to Denver, or a hotel. I don't care, but you are not staying here. She looked at me for a long moment. I expected her to scream. I expected her to cry. Instead, she smiled. It was a tight, thin smile, unnerving. Okay, she said. I blinked. Okay, yeah, she said. If that is what you want, I think you are making a huge mistake. I think you are throwing away a gold mine. But it is your house, she shrugged. I will return the stuff tomorrow, she said. I will call Caleb and cancel. It was too easy. The surrender was too fast. Just then, her phone buzzed in her hand. She looked at the screen, and her eyes widened. I have to take this, she said. She turned and walked quickly toward the back door, sliding it open and stepping out onto the deck. She closed the glass door behind her. I watched her through the glass. She was huddled in her coat, shivering in the cold. She answered the phone and immediately started whispering. Her hand cupped over her mouth. She looked terrified. It wasn't the demeanor of a woman who had just agreed to leave. It was the demeanor of a woman who was cornered. I looked at the vision board on the fridge. I reached up and ripped it down. The magnets clattered to the floor. An hour later, a heavy diesel engine roared up the driveway. I looked out the window. A massive black pickup truck with Northline Renovations stenciled on the door had pulled in next to Marla's SUV. A man jumped out. He was big, wearing Carhartt overalls and a beanie. He had a clipboard in his hand. This had to be Caleb Rusk. I put on my coat and walked out onto the porch. Marla was already there, rushing down the steps to meet him. Caleb, she chirped, her voice too high. We have a little situation. I walked down the steps past her. I am Ellie Griffin, I said, extending a hand. I am the owner of this property. Caleb looked at me, then at Marla, then back to me. He didn't shake my hand. He looked annoyed. Yeah, I know, he said. Marla said you were coming up to check on the progress. There is no progress. I said, because there is no project. Caleb frowned, shifting his weight. Look, lady, I ordered the cabinets. They are custom shaker style. Matte black, non-refundable. I have a crew scheduled for demo on Monday. Cancel them. I said, I did not sign a contract. I did not authorize this work. Caleb laughed. A short, barking sound. He flipped through the papers on his clipboard. That is not what this says. He pulled out a document and held it up. It was a standard construction contract. At the bottom, there was a signature. E. Griffin. I stared at it. It looked like my signature, but it was shaky. The loop on the G was too wide. It looked like someone had practiced it 100 times and then drawn it slowly. That is a forgery. I said. Caleb shrugged. Looks real to me, and I have the email confirmation right here. He flipped to the next page. It was a printout of an email thread. From elliegriffin88@email.com to calebrusk@northlinereno.com. Subject: cabinet specs. Hi Caleb. OMG. These look amazing. Yes, yes, yes. Go ahead and order them. I am so excited to see the transformation. Send the invoice to Marla. She is handling the payments for me. Emoji heart. Emoji house. I felt my face heat up. The tone was so foreign, so sickeningly sweet. It was a caricature of a woman I had never been. I looked at Caleb. Mr. Rusk, I said, I do not use emojis in business emails. I do not use exclamation points like that. This was sent by my sister, pretending to be me. Caleb looked at Marla. She was standing near the woodpile, arms crossed, looking at the ground. Is that true, Marla? He asked. Marla looked up, her eyes wide and wet. She is lying, she said. Her voice was trembling. She approved everything. She is just getting cold feet because of the cost. She does this all the time. She commits to things and then backs out and blames me. I gaped at her. The lie was so bold, so immediate. Marla, I shouted. Caleb held up a hand. Whoa. Ladies, I am not a referee. I am a contractor. I have a signed contract and a deposit. If you want to cancel, that is fine. But I'm keeping the deposit for materials and time. And if you breach the contract on the labor, there is a cancellation fee of $2,000. $2,000. I said, I am not paying you a dime. This is fraud. Caleb stepped closer, invading my personal space. He smelled of tobacco and stale coffee. Look, he said, his voice dropping. I don't care about your family drama. I have a business to run. You pay the fee, or I file a lien on the property. Simple as that. A lien. He would put a legal claim on my house. It would freeze the title. I wouldn't be able to sell or refinance. Get off my property. I said. Caleb smirked. He turned to Marla. Call me when you figure it out, he said. He got in his truck and backed out, spraying gravel. I turned to Marla. She was already walking back to the house. You forged my signature, I said to her back. She didn't stop. I had to practice. She called out over her shoulder. You have such messy handwriting. I stood in the driveway, shaking with rage. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something. Instead, I pulled out my phone. I needed an adult. I needed my mother. I sat on the deck railing, the phone pressed to my ear. The sun was going down, and the temperature was dropping fast. Valerie Griffin answered on the third ring. Hello, darling, she said. Her voice was warm, familiar. Mom, I said, I am at the cabin. Marla is here. Oh, good, she said. I am so glad you two are together. Marla told me she was going up there to fix the place up for you. Isn't that sweet of her? I closed my eyes. Marla had already planted the seed. Mom, it is not sweet, I said. She broke in. She stole my money. She hired a contractor without asking me. She forged my signature. There was a pause on the line. Ellie, Valerie said, her tone shifting to that soothing, patronizing voice she used when I was a teenager. Stole is a very strong word. She used my bank account. Mom, I said, she spent $5,000. She removed my cabinet doors. Well, she is just trying to be helpful, Valerie said. You know how Marla gets? She gets excited. She has a vision. She has a delusion. I snapped. Mom, I have to kick her out. I have to call the police if she doesn't pay me back. Ellie? Valerie's voice was sharp now. You will do no such thing. Call the police on your sister. Have you lost your mind? She committed fraud. Mom, she is struggling. Ellie, Valerie cried. Derek left her. She is all alone. She has nothing. And look at you. You have your big job in Seattle. You have your stock options. You have the cabin. Can't you just absorb it? Absorb it. The words hit me like a physical blow. Absorb the theft. Absorb the violation. Because I was the strong one. Because I was the one who could afford to be hurt. It is not about the money, I said, my voice breaking. It is about respect. She is destroying my home. It is just a kitchen. Ellie, Valerie said, it can be fixed. But if you kick her out in the snow, if you turn this into a legal thing, you will break this family. You are the stable one. Honey, we rely on you to be the bigger person. I held the phone away from my ear. I looked at the screen. The stable one, that wasn't a compliment. It was a shackle. It meant I was the designated shock absorber for the family's dysfunction. Marla got to be the hurricane. I had to be the sandbag. I have to go. Mom, I said. Ellie, promise me you won't. I hung up. I sat on the railing for a long time. The wind bit through my fleece, numbing my fingers. I felt incredibly lonely. My mother didn't see me. She saw a resource, a safety net for her favorite. Broken child. I wiped a tear from my cheek. It was cold. I couldn't do this alone. My family was compromised. My judgment was compromised because every time I looked at Marla, I saw the little girl who used to braid my hair, not the woman who was robbing me blind. I scrolled through my contacts until I found Tessa. Tessa Monroe, my best friend since college, a corporate litigator in Chicago. She was the opposite of my family. She was logic, steel, and fire. I hit call. She answered immediately. Hey, Elle, how is the hermit life? It is a disaster, I said. I told her everything. The lights on, the wind chimes, the missing cabinets, the emails, Caleb, Mom. I talked for 20 minutes without stopping. When I finished, there was silence on the line. Then Tessa spoke. Her voice was low and dangerous. Ellie, she said, listen to me very carefully. I am listening. This is not a misunderstanding, she said. This is not a family squabble. This is coercion with a smile. Marla is not trying to help you. She is trying to possess you. She is colonizing your life because hers fell apart. I know, I whispered. No, you don't know, Tessa said. You think if you explain it to her, she will stop. You think if you are firm, she will respect you. She won't. She has already escalated to felony fraud. Ellie, the forgery, the impersonation, the bank transfers. What do I do? I asked. You need a lawyer, Tessa said. Not me. I am in Illinois. You need a local property attorney in Colorado. Someone who knows the local judges and the lien laws. I can't sue my sister. I said, Mom will never forgive me. Tessa sighed. Ellie, you don't have to sue her yet, but you need to protect yourself. If that contractor files a lien, you are screwed. If someone gets hurt on that construction site, you are liable. You need to formally eject her and dispute the contract. You need professional armor. Armor, that was what I needed. I have a name for you, Tessa said. I looked him up while you were talking. Graham Voss. Voss Lyle Legal Group in Pinevale Ridge. He specializes in property disputes. Go see him tomorrow. Okay, I said. Okay. And Ellie, Tessa added, her voice softening. Do not sleep in the same room as her. Do not let her use your phone. Do not believe a word she says. She is desperate, and desperate people are dangerous. I looked through the glass door. Marla was back in the kitchen, humming to herself, wiping down the counters with a cloth. She looked so normal, so sisterly, but I knew better now. I hung up the phone. I stood up. My legs were stiff from the cold. I walked back inside. Marla looked up and smiled. Who was on the phone? She asked. Just work. I lied. It was the first time I had lied to her. It felt surprisingly good. It felt like a weapon. I am going to bed, I said. I went upstairs and locked my door. I wedged a chair under the handle. I lay in the dark, listening to the house settle. Tomorrow, I would get a lawyer. Tomorrow. I would stop being the sister and start being the owner. But tonight, I just had to survive the feeling that the person sleeping downstairs was a stranger wearing my sister's face. The offices of Voss and Lyle Legal Group were located in a converted Victorian house on the edge of Pinevale Ridge, a stark contrast to the chaotic, sawdust-choked atmosphere of my cabin. Here, the air smelled of lemon polish and old paper. The only sound was the rhythmic ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. It was a sanctuary of order, and I felt like a fugitive bringing a bag of dirty laundry into a church. I sat across from Graham Voss. He was younger than I expected, perhaps late 30s, with a face that seemed naturally set in an expression of mild, thoughtful concern. He wore a gray wool vest and had a habit of aligning his pen perfectly parallel to his notepad. I laid it all out on his mahogany desk, the photos of the missing cabinet doors, the printout of the bank charges, the business card for Northline renovations, the copy of the contract with the shaky, forged signature. Graham reviewed them in silence. He picked up the contract, adjusting his glasses, and studied the signature for a long time. Then he set it down and folded his hands. This is a mess, Ellie, he said. His voice was calm, a baritone that instantly lowered my blood pressure. I know, I said, gripping the arms of the leather chair. It is fraud. Right. She forged my name. Graham nodded slowly. Technically, yes, it is forgery. It is identity theft. It is unauthorized use of funds. If this were a stranger, I would tell you to go to the sheriff immediately and file a criminal report. We would have them arrested by dinner. He paused. looking me in the eye. "But this is your sister. And in my experience, family cases are not just legal cases, they are court cases with feelings. If you file a criminal report, the district attorney takes over. You lose control. Marla could face felony charges. Is that what you want?" I hesitated. The image of Marla in handcuffs flashed through my mind. Marla, who used to make me cinnamon toast when I was sick. Marla, who was currently destroying my life but was also the only sister I had. "I do not want her in prison," I said quietly. "I just want her out of my house. And I want my money back." Graham picked up his pen and made a note. "Civil eviction is cleaner, but slower," he said. "Since she has been there less than 30 days and has no lease, she is technically a guest who has overstayed her welcome. However, because she has established residency by receiving mail there, you mentioned the package labels, and because she has performed work on the property, she could claim she is a tenant at will." He tapped the contract. "But we have a bigger problem than the eviction," he said. "What?" I asked. "The cabinets." Graham said, "Northline Renovations." I frowned. I told the contractor to cancel. I told him the signature was fake. Graham sighed. "It might not matter to the supplier. Look at these emails." He pointed to the printout of the fake email thread Marla had created. "She created an email address that looks like yours," he explained. "She communicated with the contractor. She paid a deposit from a bank account linked to you. In the eyes of the law, she established what we call apparent authority. The supplier, Summit Peak Home Supply, received an order for custom cabinets. They have likely already started cutting the wood. If they are custom, they are non-refundable." I felt a cold weight settle in my stomach. "So I have to pay for them?" I asked, "even though I didn't order them." Graham leaned back. "We can fight it. We can argue fraud. But if Northline Renovations has already paid Summit Peak, Northline is going to come after you for the balance, and they have a signed contract and a deposit trail. It creates a muddy legal water. If we stop payment, they file a mechanic's lien on your house." I rubbed my temples. Marla had not just dug a hole. She had poured concrete into it. "So what do?" I asked. Graham opened a drawer and pulled out a fresh legal pad. "We create a paper trail so bright it blinds a judge," he said. "First, we draft a formal demand letter to Marla. We state clearly that she has no lease, no ownership, and no authorization to renovate. We give her a deadline to vacate, 48 hours. Second," he continued, writing as he spoke, "we send a certified letter to Northline Renovations and Summit Peak asserting fraud and demanding they cease all work immediately. We put them on notice that the contract is void. And third," he looked up, his expression serious, "you need to protect your credit. You need to file a limited fraud report with your bank. You do not have to name Marla initially if you want to give her a chance to pay it back. But you have to be on record stating these charges were unauthorized." He tore the sheet off the pad and handed it to me. "Ellie," he said gently, "you need to be prepared. When you serve her this notice, she is going to escalate. Family members in this position usually do one of two things. They collapse, or they attack. You need to be the rock. Do not engage in emotional arguments. Stick to the paper." I took the paper. It felt flimsy, but it was the only weapon I had. I hired him. I wrote a check for a retainer I couldn't really afford, considering my drained bank account, and walked out into the cold afternoon air. The drive back to the cabin was excruciating. Every mile closer to Pinevale Ridge felt like tightening a vice around my chest. I had the legal documents in a manila envelope on the seat beside me. They were my shield. But when I pulled into the driveway, my shield felt very small. The first thing I noticed was the dumpster. It was a large, green roll-off container sitting in the driveway, right where Marla's car had been the night before. It was half full of debris. I parked and ran to the house, my heart hammering against my ribs. I threw open the front door. The smell of dust was overwhelming. It hung in the air like a fog, tasting of drywall and old insulation. "Marla?" I yelled. I ran into the kitchen. I stopped dead. It was gone. The granite countertops were gone. The lower cabinets were ripped out, leaving jagged holes in the drywall where they had been anchored. The sink was missing. the pipes capping off with red plastic plugs. The floor was covered in a layer of debris, splinters, tile shards, and bent nails. It looked like a bomb had gone off. Marla was standing in the middle of the ruin, holding a broom. She was wearing a pair of cute overalls and a bandana in her hair, looking like a Rosie the Riveter poster. "Oh, good. You are back," she chirped. Her voice was bright, completely at odds with the destruction around her. I stared at the hole in the wall where my dishwasher used to be. "Marla," I whispered, "what did you do?" "I told you," she said, sweeping a pile of dust into a pan. "The crew came by this morning to do the demo. They had an opening in their schedule, so they squeezed us in. Isn't it great? Now we have a clean slate." I looked at her. She was smiling. She was actually smiling. "I told you to stop," I said. "I told Caleb to stop." She waved a hand dismissively. "Oh," I smoothed that over. "I told him you were just stressed from the drive and that we were good to go." I gave him another $500 cash to keep the crew on site. "Cash," I repeated. "My cash." "Well, technically I pulled it from the ATM using the app." She said, "But look, Ellie, visualize it. The island is going to go right there. It will be massive." She pointed to a spot on the floor marked with blue tape. I felt a scream building in my throat. Hot and acidic. I wanted to shake her. I wanted to drag her out of the house by her perfectly highlighted hair. But I remembered Graham's voice. "Be the rock. Do not engage in emotional arguments." I took a deep breath. I walked over to the dining table, which was covered in a plastic tarp, and set down the manila envelope. "Marla," I said, "sit down." "Not right now," she said, turning back to her sweeping. "I want to get this dust up before dinner. I am making fondue. Remember how we used to have fondue on New Year's Eve when we were kids? Mom would let us use the fancy forks." She was pivoting. I recognized the tactic immediately. When cornered, Marla didn't fight. She seduced. She weaponized nostalgia. "I bought a portable burner." She chattered on. "Since the stove is disconnected, it will be like camping. Just you and me. Sisters in the wild." She looked over her shoulder, her eyes wide and pleading. "I just want us to be close again. Ellie, like we were before you moved away, before you got so corporate." The word hung there. Corporate. As if having a job and paying bills was a character flaw. I walked over to where she was standing. I saw something in the corner of the living room I hadn't noticed before. A tripod. It was set up facing the kitchen. A ring light mounted on top of it. A phone was clamped into the holder. "Is that recording?" I asked. Marla froze. "Oh, that. I am just doing a time-lapse. People love demo videos. It is so satisfying to watch things get torn apart." "People?" I asked. "What people?" "My followers," she said. I walked over to the tripod. The screen was dark, but the recording light was blinking. I tapped the screen. It lit up. It wasn't just a camera app. It was a live stream dashboard for a platform I vaguely recognized. The account name at the top read Marla Mindset Studio. There were comments scrolling up the side. "Love the overalls. So brave to tackle a reno alone. Can't wait to see the after. You are live streaming this," I said. Marla rushed over and blocked the camera with her body. "It is for the brand." "Ellie," she said, her voice rising. "Marla Mindset is going to be huge. I am pivoting to lifestyle and home renovation. It is a goldmine. Sponsors pay thousands for this kind of content." I looked at the comments again. "So brave to tackle a reno alone." "Alone," I read aloud. "You are telling them you own this place." Marla flushed. "It is just storytelling." "Ellie, it is a narrative. Rebuilding my life in the mountains. People connect with struggle. They connect with the phoenix rising from the ashes. You are not rising from ashes." "Marla," I said, "you are making the ashes. You are burning down my house to warm your hands." I reached out and turned off the ring light. The room suddenly felt darker, gloomier. "I am not burning it down," she snapped, dropping the sweet act. "I am increasing the equity. You are so short-sighted. You will thank me when this house is worth double what you paid for it." I walked back to the table and picked up the envelope. "I am not waiting for that," I said. I pulled out the papers Graham had drafted. "This is a formal notice to cease and desist," I said, handing her the first document. "It demands that you stop all work on this property immediately. If any contractor steps foot on this land tomorrow, I will have them trespassed by the sheriff." Marla took the paper, her hands trembling slightly. She didn't read it. She just stared at me. "And this," I said, handing her the second document, "is a notice to vacate. You have 48 hours to remove your personal belongings and leave the premises." Marla's face crumbled. The mask of the cheerful renovator dissolved, revealing a terrified, desperate woman. "You are kicking me out," she whispered. "In the winter, I am asking you to leave my home." I said, "You have a home in Denver." "I don't," she screamed. The sound tore through the empty kitchen. "I don't have a home in Denver. Derek changed the locks. He put my stuff in storage." She sank onto the floor, right in the middle of the dust, and buried her face in her hands. I stood there, feeling the familiar pull of guilt. My sister was homeless. My sister was suffering. But then I looked at the tripod. I looked at the demo debris. "Marla," I said gently, "why didn't you tell me?" "Because you would have judged me," she sobbed. "You always judge me. You think I am a mess." "I don't think you are a mess," I said. "But you are making a mess. Why the renovation? Why spend money you don't have if you are homeless?" She looked up, mascara running down her cheeks. "Because I need the deal," she said. "What deal?" "The sponsor," she sniffed. "Summit Peak. They didn't just sell me the cabinets. They offered me a partnership. If I film the renovation and feature their products, they give me the materials at cost and pay me a stipend. $5,000 upon completion of the series." I stared at her. $5,000? She had destroyed a $50,000 kitchen for a $5,000 payout. "And the loan?" I asked. "Where did the money come from for the labor?" She went silent. She looked away. "Marla," I said, "where did the money come from?" "Just a business loan," she mumbled. "For Sunspire Living, my LLC?" I felt a prickle of unease. I walked over to the pile of mail that had accumulated on the side table near the door. I had been too distracted to check it earlier. I shuffled through the envelopes. Most were addressed to Resident or Ellie Griffin, but there were a few for Marla. One caught my eye. It was a red envelope. Urgent. Final notice. The return address was Cedarstone Lending. I picked it up. Marla was on her feet instantly. "Don't touch that," she said, lunging for it. I held it out of reach. Cedarstone Lending. I read, "Marla, this is a predatory lender. These are the places that charge 40% interest." "Give it to me," she shrieked, snatching the envelope from my hand. "It is spam. They send those to everyone." But her hands were shaking so hard she nearly dropped it. I looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't just sad about her marriage. She was terrified. She was cornered. I pulled out my phone. "What are you doing?" she asked, clutching the envelope to her chest. "I am texting my lawyer." I said, "I want him to run a search on Sunspire Living Company." Marla's eyes went wide. "Ellie, no, you don't need to do that. It is private business. If you are using my house as collateral for your business, it is my business." I said, I sent the text. "Graham, can you check public filings for Sunspire Living Company, specifically regarding liens or judgments?" I put the phone down. "Marla," I said, "I need you to be honest with me. Right now, is there a lien on this project?" "No," she said. "Absolutely not. It is just a personal loan." My phone pinged. Graham was fast. I looked at the message. Searching. Found a UCC filing. Sunspire Living Co. took a short-term merchant cash advance from Cedarstone 6 months ago. $40,000. Status is showing default as of last week. They have a confession of judgment. I looked up at Marla. $40,000. I said, "You borrowed $40,000. She flinched as if I had hit her. "I had to," she cried. "The wellness retreat in Bali. I put deposits down, and then people canceled. I was going to lose everything. So you came here," I said, the pieces falling into place. "You came here to flip my house. You thought you could do a quick cosmetic reno. Film it. Get the sponsor money. Maybe rent it out for big cash and pay off the loan before anyone noticed. She didn't deny it. She just stood there, breathing hard. I wasn't trying to steal it, she whispered. I was going to pay you back. I just needed a win. Ellie, I needed one win. I looked around the decimated kitchen. This isn't a win. Marla, I said, it is a crime scene. I walked back to the table and picked up the notice to vacate. You have to go, I said. No, she pleaded. Ellie, please. If I leave, I can't finish the video. If I don't finish the video, I breach the sponsor contract. They will sue me. Cedarstone will garnish my accounts. You are sentencing me to bankruptcy. You sentenced yourself. I said, my voice hardening. You dragged me into this without asking. You made me liable for your debts. I stepped closer to her. I am stopping the work. Marla, I am emailing Summit Peak tonight to tell them the order was fraudulent, and I am notifying the bank. She looked at me with pure hatred then. The sisterly mask was gone completely. You are so selfish, she hissed. You have everything. You sit in your high-rise in Seattle and judge everyone. You don't know what it is like to fail. I didn't answer. I didn't tell her about the nights I cried from stress. I didn't tell her about the loneliness. I didn't tell her that this cabin was the only thing holding me together. I pointed to the door. 48 hours, I said, or I call the sheriff. I turned and walked up the stairs to the loft. I heard her scream downstairs, a primal, frustrated sound, then the sound of something shattering, glass against the wall. I went into my bedroom and locked the door. I sat on the bed and opened my laptop. My hands were cold. I drafted the email to Summit Peak Home Supply. To whom it may concern, I am writing to formally dispute the validity of Order 4599. I typed the words, sealing my sister's fate. I was cutting the cord. I was popping the balloon. I felt sick. Graham had warned me. Court cases with feelings. I didn't feel like a winner. I felt like an executioner. But then I thought about the hole in the kitchen floor. I thought about the fake signature. I thought about the Marla mindset followers cheering for the destruction of my sanctuary. I hit send. Then I logged into my bank portal. I filed the dispute for the Northline charges. I was building the wall, brick by brick, document by document, downstairs. The house was silent. Marla had stopped screaming. The silence was worse. It was the silence of a trapped animal waiting for an opening. I didn't sleep that night. I listened to the wind rattling the loose plastic tarp over the kitchen window. It sounded like the house was breathing, wheezing through a punctured lung. I kept my phone in my hand, ready to dial 911. But as I lay there in the dark, I knew Marla wasn't just going to walk away. She had too much to lose. And now, so did I. The 48-hour countdown began, not with a silence, but with a cacophony. I woke up the morning after serving the eviction notice to the sound of Marla's voice penetrating the floorboards. She was not screaming. She was performing. Her voice had that tremulous, choked-back tears quality that she always used when she wanted to solicit pity without asking for it directly. I cannot believe it either, Aunt Linda, Marla was saying, loud enough for me to hear from the loft. I scrubbed her floors. I tried to make it nice for her, and she handed me a legal paper. In the middle of a blizzard, I lay in bed, staring at the pine ceiling. There was no blizzard. The sky outside was a piercing, cloudless blue, but facts had never mattered much to Marla. Only feelings mattered, specifically hers. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, then again, then a third time. I rolled over and picked it up. Aunt Linda. Ellie, I just got off the phone with your sister. Please tell me you are not throwing her out in the snow. She is going through a divorce. Have a heart. Cousin Sarah, who I hadn't seen since Christmas 3 years ago, heard about the cabin drama. Yikes. Maybe cut her some slack? She's family. Mom, I'm not taking sides, but your aunt is very upset. You need to fix this narrative. Ellie, it looks bad. It looks bad. That was the Griffin family motto. It didn't matter if the house was burning down, as long as the neighbors didn't see the smoke. I got out of bed and dressed in heavy clothes, jeans, flannel, boots. I felt like I was putting on armor. I walked downstairs. moving quietly. I felt a new, creeping sensation on the back of my neck, the feeling of being watched. Marla was in the living room, curled up in the corner of the sofa with a blanket wrapped around her, clutching a mug of tea. She looked small and fragile. The tripod was gone from the corner, but I noticed her phone was propped up against a stack of books on the coffee table, the camera lens facing the hallway where I was standing. She was recording. I knew it. She was waiting for me to explode, to yell, to act like the monster she was describing to our aunt. I walked past her without a word. I went to the kitchen, or the hollowed-out shell where the kitchen used to be, and started the coffee maker I had set up on a folding table. "Good morning," Marla said. Her voice was icy, sharp enough to cut glass. "Good morning," I said. My voice was low, neutral, gray rock. "I heard you walking around upstairs," she said. "I suppose you are calling the police now, to drag me out in handcuffs." She was baiting me. She wanted a soundbite. "I am not calling the police," I said, keeping my back to her as I poured water. "You have until tomorrow morning to vacate. That is the timeline. You are heartless." She spat. "I am your sister. I changed your diapers. You also forged my signature and spent $5,000 of my money." I said, "I kept my volume down." I did not turn around. If she posted this, I wanted to look like the calm one. I wanted to look like the reasonable person dealing with an unreasonable situation. But inside, I was vibrating with anxiety. I felt like a prisoner in my own home, afraid to speak, afraid to move, afraid that my own frustration would be edited into a viral villain arc. I took my coffee and walked out the back door. Stepping into the cold air, I needed to breathe. I needed to get away from the lens. Around 10 o'clock, a truck pulled into the driveway. It wasn't Marla's SUV, and it wasn't the delivery truck. It was Caleb Rusk. I watched from the window as he slammed the door of his pickup and marched up the steps. He looked angry. He was holding a piece of paper, the letter Graham had sent via courier the previous afternoon. I opened the door before he could knock. I didn't want him pounding on the wood. I felt like the house was fragile enough already. "Mr. Rusk," I said. He shoved the paper at me. "What is this?" he demanded. "Stop work order? Fraud? Are you kidding me?" I stepped out onto the porch. Closing the door behind me, I didn't want Marla involved in this. This was business. "It is not a joke," I said. "I did not authorize the work. The signature on your contract is a forgery. My lawyer sent that letter to protect my property." Caleb laughed, a harsh, barking sound. He took off his beanie and rubbed his head aggressively. "Lady, I don't care about your lawyer. I have materials on order. I have a crew scheduled. You think you can just pull the plug because you got cold feet? You are trying to get a free remodel. That is what this is. You let us do the demo, and now you want to kick us out so you don't have to pay the labor." I felt a flash of anger. The accusation was so absurd, so inverted from the truth. I didn't want a remodel. I said, my voice steady, "I liked my kitchen. My sister hired you. My sister signed the paper. My sister lied to both of us." Caleb stepped closer. He was a big man, broad-shouldered, and he used his size to intimidate. "I don't know your sister," he said. "I know the owner of the property is liable for improvements. That is the law. You can fight with her all you want. But you owe me for the demo and the cabinet deposit. If I don't get a check by Friday, I am filing the lien, and I will sue you for breach of contract." He jabbed a finger at my chest, stopping just an inch away. "I know your type." He sneered. "Rich city girl comes up here, thinks she can push the locals around. It doesn't work like that in Pinevale. Get off my porch." I said, "Make me," he said. I pulled out my phone. I have the sheriff on speed dial. "Mr. Rusk, and my lawyer has already flagged your license with the state board pending an investigation into the forgery. If you want to add trespassing and harassment to the list, stay right there." His eyes narrowed. He looked at the phone, then at me. The mention of the state board seemed to hit a nerve. He took a step back. "You haven't heard the last of this," he muttered. He turned and stomped down the stairs. I waited until his truck disappeared down the switchbacks before I let my shoulders drop. My hands were shaking. I went inside and texted Graham. "Caleb Rusk just left. He threatened a lien. He was aggressive. Graham called me 5 minutes later. "Ellie, are you okay?" "I am fine." I said, "I just want this to be over. I did some digging on Mr. Rusk after we sent the letter." Graham said. His tone was serious. He used to operate under the name CR Builders about 3 years ago. The company was dissolved after multiple complaints to the Consumer Protection Board. He has a history of taking large deposits and leaving jobs unfinished, or charging for change orders that were never approved. I felt a cold chill. So he is a grifter. He is someone who operates in the gray areas. Graham said, he saw Marla coming a mile away. He likely knew the signature was shaky, but he didn't care as long as the check cleared. The good news is, his history makes him vulnerable. If he files a lien, we can petition to have it removed as frivolous, given the fraud context. But Ellie, you need to be careful. Men like that don't like losing money. I hung up the phone. I felt besieged. Inside, my sister was plotting against me. Outside, a predatory contractor was threatening my title. I needed to get out of the house. I couldn't breathe in there. I grabbed my keys and yelled to Marla, "I am going to town." She didn't answer. She was typing furiously on her phone. I drove into Pinevale Ridge, needing the normalcy of a coffee shop. I ordered a black coffee and sat in the corner of the Roasted Bean, trying to answer work emails on my phone. My boss in Seattle had been understanding so far, but I knew his patience had limits. I was supposed to be on PTO, recharging. Instead, I was fighting a war. Ellie? Ellie Griffin? I looked up. Standing over my table was Reena Patel. We had met a few times at community mixers over the years. She ran Aspen Line Property Care, the biggest management firm in the valley. She was sharp, professional, and knew everything that happened within a 50-mile radius. "Reena," I said, forcing a smile. "Hi." She didn't smile back. She pulled out a chair. "Do you mind if I sit?" "Please," I said. She sat down, smoothing her scarf. "Ellie, I am going to be direct because I like you. What is going on at your cabin?" I sighed. It is a long story. My sister. I heard about the sister. Reena interrupted. "Small town, but I am talking about the business." "Business?" I asked. "Ellie, people are talking," Reena said, lowering her voice. "I had coffee with a member of the community council this morning. They are saying you are converting the property into a high-density short-term rental. A content house." My stomach dropped. "A content house? That is not true." I said, my sister had some crazy idea. But I shut it down. Reena looked skeptical. "There is a dumpster in your driveway. There is a sign for Northline renovations. And you know Caleb Rusk is bad news, right? And there are rumors that you are advertising a renovation retreat." She leaned in. "The council is looking at you. Ellie, you know the rules in Pinevale Ridge. We have strict caps on short-term rentals. You need a permit. You need inspections. If they think you are operating an illegal hotel, they will fine you. $500 a day. $500 a day. Reena, I swear." I said, "I am not renting it. I am evicting my sister tomorrow. She did all of this without my permission." Reena studied my face. She seemed to decide I was telling the truth. "Okay," she said. "If that is the case, you need to get in front of this. There is a council meeting today at 2:00. You should go. Show your face. Tell them it is a misunderstanding. If you let the rumor mill run, they will slap a cease and desist on your title before you can blink." I looked at my watch. It was 1:30. I stood up. "Thank you. Reena. Seriously." She nodded. "Good luck. Ellie, you are going to need it." The Pinevale Ridge Community Council met in a wood-paneled room in the town hall, the same building where I had discovered the permit inquiry. There were 5 board members sitting behind a long table. They looked like a jury. I sat in the back row, feeling like a delinquent teenager. When they opened the floor for public comment, I stood up. "My name is Ellie Griffin." I said, "I own the property on Granite Creek Road." The chairman, a man with a thick white mustache named Mr. Henderson, peered at me over his glasses. "Ah, Ms. Griffin," he said. "We were just discussing your property. We have received reports of unpermitted construction and commercial advertising." I walked to the front. My hands were sweating. "Mr. Chairman," I said, "I am here to clarify the situation. I am not converting my home into a rental. I am not running a business. The construction activity you see was unauthorized work initiated by a family member who was staying at the property without my full consent. I have halted all work. I have issued a notice to vacate." "Mr. Henderson frowned. "Unauthorized? There is a dumpster." "Mrs. Griffin, there was a permit inquiry for a commercial gas range. That inquiry was not made by me." I said, "It was made by my sister, pretending to be me. I am currently dealing with a case of identity theft and fraud." A murmur went through the room. Mr. Henderson looked at the other board members. "This is a domestic matter." "Ms. Griffin," he said, "but the council is concerned with the impact on the neighborhood. We have seen the listing." "The listing?" I asked. "What listing?" One of the board members, a woman named Susan, held up a tablet. "On Cabin Nest." She said, "It is live. The Pinevale Renovation Retreat. It says you are accepting bookings starting March 1st. I felt the blood drain from my face. Cabin Nest. Marla had told me she created a profile. She hadn't told me she published it. "May I see that?" I asked. Susan turned the tablet around. There it was. My living room, my view. Experience the transformation. Join us for a unique stay where you can participate in the design process. Includes masterclasses on wellness and home renewal. The host name was Ellie G. The profile photo was a picture of me. A picture Marla had taken of me 2 years ago at Christmas, laughing and holding a mug of cocoa. She had stolen my face. She had stolen my name, and she was selling tickets to my house. I stared at the screen, a wave of nausea rolling over me. "This is not me," I whispered. "Ms. Griffin?" "Mr. Henderson asked. I looked up. I felt tears pricking my eyes, but I forced them back. I was the rock. I had to be the rock. "Mr. Chairman," I said, my voice shaking slightly, "that listing is fraudulent. I did not create it. I did not approve it. I will contact the platform immediately to have it removed. I assure you, there will be no guests. There will be no retreat." Mr. Henderson looked at me for a long moment. He seemed to see the desperation in my eyes. "Very well," he said. "We will hold off on the fines for 48 hours. But if that listing is still up on Friday, and if the unpermitted work is not remediated, we will have to take action. The code is the code." "Thank you," I said. I turned and walked out of the room. I felt the eyes of the entire town on my back. Civic consequences. Marla's fantasy world was leaking into the real world, and I was the one drowning in it. I sat in my truck in the town hall parking lot. I pulled up the Cabin Nest app on my phone. I found the listing. I clicked on the host profile. LEG/verified host. Verified. How? I clicked on the verification badge. Identity verified via driver's license. My breath caught. My driver's license. I remembered leaving my purse on the kitchen counter when I first arrived. While I went out to get wood, Marla had been there alone. She must have photographed my license. She hadn't just used my name. She had committed a felony, a federal offense. She had used my government ID to create a commercial account. I looked at the booking calendar. March 1st to 5th. Reserved. March 10th to 12th. Reserved. People were booking. Real people with real credit cards. If I canceled these bookings, the platform would charge penalties. If I didn't, strangers would show up at my door expecting a wellness retreat. I screamed. I let it out. A raw, guttural sound that filled the cab of the truck. I slammed my hands against the steering wheel. Why? Why was she doing this? It wasn't just money. It was something darker. She was wearing my life like a skin suit. She wanted my stability, my credit score, my reputation. She wanted to be Ellie Griffin, the successful one, but without the work, without the discipline, without the years of sacrifice. She was a parasite. I started the engine. I drove back up the mountain. I wasn't driving carefully anymore. I took the switchbacks fast, the tires skidding on the gravel. I pulled into the driveway. Marla's car was still there. I stormed into the house. Marla was in the kitchen area, setting up her ring light again. She had moved the portable burner to a different angle. "Marla?" I said. She turned. She saw my face, and for the first time, she looked genuinely afraid. "What is it?" she asked. I held up my phone, showing her the Cabin Nest listing. "You verified the account," I said. My voice was deadly quiet. "You used my driver's license." Marla took a step back, bumping into the island. I just borrowed it," she stammered. "I needed to get the badge. It helps with the algorithm. You stole my identity." "Marla," I said, "you committed identity theft. You posted my picture. You are booking guests. I was going to tell you," she cried. "I was waiting for the first payout. I wanted to surprise you with the money." "Surprise me," I shouted. The control finally snapped. "You almost got me fined $500 a day by the council. I just came from a meeting where I had to apologize to the entire town for your lies." Marla flinched. "You went to the council?" "Yes, because Reena Patel told me everyone thinks I'm running an illegal hotel." Marla's face twisted. "Reena Patel is a gossip." "You shouldn't listen to her." I walked toward her. She shrank back. "Delete it," I said. "What? Delete the listing? Right now? In front of me? I can't," she said. "I have bookings. If I cancel, my host rating will tank." "I don't care about your host rating," I yelled. "I care about my life. Delete it." Marla clutched her phone to her chest. "No," she said. "This is my business. You can't make me destroy my business." I looked at her. She was delusional. She truly believed that my house, my ID, and my money constituted her business. "Fine," I said. I turned and walked to the wall where the internet router was plugged in. "What are you doing?" she asked. I reached down and yanked the cord out of the wall. Then I unplugged the modem. "I am cutting you off," I said. I gathered the cords in my hands. "Hey!" she screamed, running toward me. "Give that back. I am uploading." I held the cords away from her. "You are done. Marla. You are offline." She tried to grab them, clawing at my arm. Her nails dug into my skin. I shoved her back, not hard, but firmly. "Don't touch me," I said. She stumbled back, hitting the wall. She looked at me with wide, shocked eyes. Then she looked at the tripod. It was recording. She had captured the whole thing. The shouting, the shoving. A slow, terrifying smile spread across her face. "You just assaulted me," she whispered. I stared at her. I realized then that she had been waiting for this. She had pushed and pushed until I reacted, and now she had the footage. She walked over to the phone and stopped the recording. "That is going to do numbers," she said softly. The rich, abusive sister attacking the poor. Homeless refugee. I felt cold all over. "Get out," I said. "Not until tomorrow," she said. Her confidence suddenly restored. The notice said 48 hours. I have rights. She picked up her phone and walked into the living room. Humming, I stood in the wreckage of my kitchen, holding the internet cables. My arm was bleeding where she had scratched me. I was shaking. I walked to the front door. I put on my coat. I went out to the shed. I found the toolbox. I found the spare deadbolt set I had bought a year ago and never installed. I walked back to the house. I went to the back door, the one she kept using to take her calls. I took out the screwdriver. I started taking the lock apart. I wasn't waiting for tomorrow. I was securing the perimeter now. I changed the back door lock, then the garage keypad code. I went to the front door. Marla was watching TV, ignoring me. I took out the screws on the front deadbolt. "What are you doing?" she asked from the couch. "Maintenance," I said. I replaced the lock. I put the new key in my pocket. I checked the windows. I locked them all. I was locking myself in with her. It was a nightmare. But I had to make sure that once she left, if she left, she couldn't get back in. I went upstairs to the loft. I locked my bedroom door. I sat on the bed and looked at the scratch on my arm. I took a picture of it. Document everything. I opened my laptop. I found the Cabin Nest support page. report identity theft. I started typing. My name is Ellie Griffin. My identity has been used without my consent to create a host account. I attached the photo of my driver's license. I attached the police non-emergency report number I had generated online while sitting in the truck. I was mourning. I was grieving the sister I used to have, the sister who taught me how to braid hair, the sister who protected me from bullies. That sister was dead. The woman downstairs was a stranger who would burn me alive to keep herself warm. I finished the report and hit send. Then I sat in the silence, waiting for the sun to go down, waiting for the final battle. I knew it was coming. Marla had one card left to play. She had the video. She had the abusive sister narrative. But she didn't know one thing. I had been recording too. My phone, tucked in my flannel pocket, had been running a voice memo since I walked in the door. It had captured her admission about the driver's license. It had captured her saying, "This is my business." It had captured her taunt about the video doing numbers. I wasn't just a product manager. I was a documentation expert. I saved the file. Evidence_Marla_confession_01. I lay back on the pillow. Let her post the video. Let her try to destroy me. I was ready. But as I closed my eyes, a single tear leaked out and ran into my ear. God, I missed her. I missed who she pretended to be. And that was the hardest part of all. The deadline I had given Marla hung over the cabin like a low-pressure system. 48 hours. It was a blink of an eye in a renovation schedule, but an eternity when you were trapped in a house with the person you were evicting. The morning of the deadline, I came downstairs expecting war. I expected shouting, or perhaps another staged video where she threw herself into the snow for her followers. Instead, I found silence. Marla was sitting at the dining table, the one covered in construction dust. With her hands folded, she was wearing a simple sweater. No makeup. And her hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail. She looked younger. She looked like the sister I remembered from before the marriage. Before the influencers. Before the desperate climb to nowhere. She slid a piece of paper across the table toward me. It was a letter. Handwritten on thick, cream-colored stationery she must have brought with her. "Read it," she said softly. "Please." I picked it up. Her handwriting was beautiful, loopy and artistic, the same handwriting she had used to forge my signature on the contractor's agreement. Though I tried to push that thought away. "Dearest Ellie, I know I messed up. I know I crossed lines. I was just so lost after Derek kicked me out, and I thought if I could build something beautiful here, you would be proud of me. I wanted to be the sister who gave you a dream kitchen. Not the sister who caused you stress. I am so sorry. Please, let's fix this. I have a plan. I will pay you back $200 a month starting in June. I will do all the labor myself to finish the counters so you don't have to pay Caleb. Just give me 1 more week. 1 week to set things right. And then I will go. Love, Marla." I looked up. Her eyes were wet. "I just want to fix it." "Ellie," she whispered, "I don't want to leave like this. We are family." My chest tightened. This was the Marla I had mourned, the vulnerable one, the one who needed me. The logical part of my brain, the product manager part, was screaming red flag, but the sister part was already wavering. $200 a month was nothing, but the sentiment, maybe the sentiment was real. "I need to think about it," I said. I took the letter and walked out to the deck. I took a picture of it and texted it to Graham Voss. She wants to stay 1 more week to finish the work. She offered a payment plan. She seemed sincere. "What do you think?" Graham called me 3 minutes later. "Ellie," he said. His voice was sharp. "Absolutely not." "Why?" I asked, watching Marla through the glass. She looked so small sitting there. "Look at the numbers," Graham said. $200 a month? Ellie, she did $5,000 in damage to the demolition alone, plus the unauthorized charges. At that rate, it would take her 2 years to pay you back. And that is assuming she actually pays. He paused, and I could hear him shuffling papers. But that is not the dangerous part, he continued. The dangerous part is the timeline. 1 more week puts her over the 30-day mark. In Colorado, If she stays 30 days, she establishes tenancy. You won't be able to evict her without a court order that takes months. And notice the wording? She admits she messed up. She does not admit to fraud. She does not admit to forgery. This isn't an apology. Ellie, it is a legal trap disguised as a greeting card. I lowered the phone. A trap. She is trying to run out the clock, Graham said. Do not sign anything. Do not agree to the extension. The notice to vacate stands. I hung up. I looked at Marla again. She wasn't looking at the mountains. She was looking at her phone, typing furiously under the table. My phone buzzed again. An email notification. Subject. Urgent. Past due notice. Unit 404. From Pinevale Secure Storage. I frowned. I didn't have a storage unit. I opened the email. Dear Ms. Griffin, this is a final reminder that your payment for Unit 404 was due on January 25th. The card on file was declined. Please update your payment method to avoid a lockout. The card on file. My debit card. The one I had frozen. Marla hadn't just used my card for the renovation. She had rented a storage unit in town under my name. I looked at Marla. She was still typing. I have to run an errand, I said, stepping back inside. She looked up. Hopeful. To think about the letter. Yes, I lied. To think about the letter. Pinevale Secure Storage was a row of corrugated metal buildings on the outskirts of town, surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. I went to the main office. The manager, a guy named Rick with a heavy beard, looked up my account. Yeah, Ellie Griffin. He said, Unit 404, 10 by 10 climate controlled. You are 3 days late. Ma'am. I paid the balance with a credit card I kept separate from the frozen accounts. I needed to see what was inside. I don't have my key. I said. Rick sighed. I can cut the lock, but you have to buy a new one. Fine. We walked down the row of orange doors. The wind was howling, rattling the metal. Rick used a pair of bolt cutters to snap the padlock. It clattered to the cement. He rolled up the door. I clicked on the flashlight of my phone and stepped inside. It wasn't empty furniture or boxes of clothes. It was a warehouse for a production company that didn't exist. There were stacks of boxes labeled Marla Mindset, merch. I opened one. Cheap hoodies with Manifest Your Mountain printed on them, hundreds of them. There was professional lighting equipment, tripods, microphones, a drone case, and in the back, sitting on a plastic folding table, was a stack of file folders. I walked over and opened the top folder. It was a contract. Sponsorship agreement. Summit Peak Home Supply. Sunspire Living Company. Deliverables. 4 video episodes documenting a complete kitchen transformation using Summit Peak cabinetry. Timeline. Final episode to be uploaded by February 15th. Compensation. Materials provided at cost. $5,000 stipend upon completion. Clawback clause. If deliverables are not met by the deadline, the creator agrees to reimburse Summit Peak for the full retail value of materials, plus a penalty of $10,000. I felt the blood drain from my face. $10,000. Plus the cost of the cabinets. Marla wasn't renovating my kitchen because she wanted to do something nice for me. She wasn't filming because she wanted to share her journey. She was on the hook. She had taken the materials. Probably spent the stipend advance already. And if she didn't deliver a finished kitchen video by February 15th, she owed them $15,000 she didn't have. My cabin wasn't a sanctuary. It was a film set for her survival. I opened the next folder. Promissory note. Cedarstone Lending. Principal. $40,000. Collateral. Inventory and future receivables. She had leveraged everything. The hoodies, the equipment, the sponsor money. I looked around the unit. This was the debris of a desperate life. She had built a house of cards, and when it started to fall, she had tried to prop it up with my timber. I took photos of everything, the contracts, the merchandise, the serial numbers on the cameras. I walked out of the unit and called Tessa. I didn't care that she was in Chicago. I needed her brain. Tessa. I said when she answered, I found a storage unit. I told her everything. The contracts, the clawback clause. Ellie. Tessa said. Her voice sounded different, clearer, closer. Where are you? I asked. I am in a rental car on I-70, she said. I landed in Denver 2 hours ago. I had a feeling you were going to need backup. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. You are here. I am about 40 minutes out, she said. Don't confront her until I get there. We are going to do this together. And Ellie? Yeah. We are not negotiating a lease extension, she said. We are negotiating a surrender. When Tessa's rental car pulled into the driveway, the relief was so profound I almost cried. She stepped out, wearing a sharp wool coat and boots that looked ready for combat. Not hiking, she hugged me hard, smelling of airport coffee and expensive perfume. Let's go, she said. We walked into the house. Marla was in the kitchen, trying to tape a plastic sheet over the hole in the wall where the backsplash used to be. She looked up, and her face fell when she saw Tessa. Tessa, Marla said, I didn't know you were visiting. Hi. Marla, Tessa said. She didn't smile. We sat at the dining table. I sat at the head. Tessa on my right. We left the chair opposite us for Marla. Sit down. Marla, I said. She sat, looking between us like a trapped animal. I thought you were thinking about my letter, she said to me, her voice trembling. I did think about it, I said, and then I went to Pinevale Secure Storage. Unit 404, Marla went pale. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. I placed the photos of the contracts on the table. I read the Summit Peak agreement. Marla, I said, I know about the deadline, February 15th. I know about the clawback clause. You don't want to stay another week to help me. You want to stay because if you don't film a finished kitchen in 2 weeks, you owe them $15,000. Marla stared at the photos. She started to shake. And the Cedarstone loan, Tessa added, leaning forward. We know about the default. We know you leveraged your business assets. Marla looked down at her hands. Her knuckles were white. You leveraged Ellie's home to pay your debts. Tessa said, You committed fraud to save your own skin. That is not a mistake, Marla. That is a felony. Marla didn't speak. A tear slid down her nose and landed on the table. Why? I asked gently. Just tell me why. It started as a whisper. I just wanted it to work. She looked up, and her face was ravaged. I told everyone I was successful. She cried. I told Derek I was making 6 figures with the wellness brand. I told Mom. I told my friends. But I wasn't making anything. Ellie, I was drowning. The retreat in Bali was a scam. I lost $20,000. The merchandise didn't sell. She gestured helplessly to the room. When Derek left, he cut me off. I had nothing. And then this sponsor deal came through, and I thought, if I just had a location, a beautiful mountain location, I could film the series, get the money, pay off the loan, and launch the channel. I thought I could flip the narrative. She looked at me, pleading. I didn't think you would mind. Ellie, you never use this place. You have so much money. I thought you would be happy to help me get back on my feet. I thought if I just finished it, you would see how beautiful it was and you would forgive me. I looked at her. She truly believed it. In her world, reality was malleable. Facts were just obstacles to a good story. You forged my name, I said. You stole my identity. You put a lien risk on my home. I was going to fix it, she screamed, slamming her hand on the table. I just needed time. Why couldn't you just give me time? Because it is not yours to take, I shouted back. The silence that followed was heavy. Tessa placed a document on the table. It was fresh, printed from a portable printer she had brought in her bag. Here is the reality, Tessa said, her voice cool and legal. You are out of time. She slid the paper toward Marla. This is a confession of judgment and a settlement agreement. Tessa explained. It states that you acknowledge the debt of $5,200 to Ellie Griffin for unauthorized charges. It states that you acknowledge forging her signature on the Northline contract. Marla recoiled. I can't sign that. If I sign that, I go to jail, No, Tessa said. Read the second clause. Ellie agrees not to file criminal charges or release this document to the public, provided that you vacate the property immediately, cease all contact with the contractors, and make payments according to the schedule. Tessa paused. However, if you fail to pay, or if you ever try to claim tenancy or ownership again, Ellie files this with the court and the police. It is your safety net, and it is her insurance. Marla looked at me. Ellie? It is the only deal. Marla, I said, you leave today. You sign the paper. We keep it private. You get to keep your reputation. What's left of it. I get my house back. Marla looked at the paper. She picked up the pen. Her hand was shaking so bad she could barely hold it. I can't believe you are doing this to me, she whispered. I am not doing it to you. I said, you did it to yourself. She signed. It was a scrawl, jagged and angry. Marla Griffin. She threw the pen down. I am leaving, she said. I hope you rot in this house. She stood up and ran up the stairs to the guest room. We heard the sounds of suitcases being thrown, drawers being ripped open. Tessa looked at me and let out a long breath. You did good. Elle, I didn't feel good. I felt sick. I'm going to change the Wi-Fi password, I said mechanically. And I need to check the accounts one last time. I opened my laptop. I logged into the bank. I stared at the screen. My heart stopped. Tessa, I said, what? There is a pending transaction. I pointed at the screen. Transfer, pending, $12,000. Destination, Sunspire Living Company. It was timed 3 minutes ago. Marla had gone upstairs, supposedly to pack. Instead, she had logged in. She tried to empty my savings. I whispered. She signed the paper, looked me in the eye, went upstairs, and tried to steal $12,000. Tessa leaned in. Is it blocked? I checked the status. Declined. Freeze in effect. Thank God for the freeze, I said. I opened the router logs. I needed to be sure. Device. Marla's iPhone 14. Time. 4:12 p.m. Activity. Banking app. She did it on the Wi-Fi I was paying for. The rage that filled me then was different. It wasn't hot. It was cold. Absolute zero. I stood up. I walked to the stairs. Marla! I yelled. She appeared at the top of the landing, dragging a suitcase. She looked defiant. What now? Do you want to check my bag? I held up the laptop. You tried to transfer $12,000. I said, just now, while you were packing. Marla's face didn't change. She didn't look guilty. She looked annoyed. I don't know what you're talking about. It must have been an auto draft I set up weeks ago. I checked the logs. Marla, I said, you initiated it manually, 3 minutes ago. She stared at me, and then she shrugged. I need first and last for an apartment, she said. You froze my cards. How did you expect me to live? I looked at Tessa. Tessa looked like she wanted to commit a felony of her own. Get out, I said. Marla dragged her suitcase down the stairs. The wheels thumped against the wood. Thump, thump, thump. She walked past me. She didn't look at me. She opened the front door. The cold air rushed in. She walked out to her car and started shoving things into the trunk. I stood in the doorway, watching. Just then, a truck roared up the driveway. It was Caleb Rusk. Again, he jumped out, waving a piece of paper. I saw the truck, he yelled, pointing at Marla's car. I knew you were skipping town. He marched up to the porch, ignoring Marla. I am filing the lien, he shouted at me. I just came from the courthouse. I have the paperwork right here. I stepped out. Tessa stepped out beside me. Mr. Rusk, Tessa said, her voice projecting like she was in a courtroom. I am Ellie Griffin's attorney. Caleb stopped. Attorney? We have a signed confession from Marla Griffin admitting to forgery and fraud regarding your contract, Tessa said. We also have proof that you were notified of the invalidity of the contract 2 days ago. Tessa crossed her arms. If you file a lien on this property based on a forged contract that you know is forged, we will sue you for slander of title and malicious prosecution, and we will report you to the State Licensing Board for predatory practices. Again, Caleb looked at Tessa. He looked at me. He looked at Marla, who was frozen by her car door. He crumpled the paper in his hand. "You people are crazy," he muttered. He turned to Marla. "And you," he said, "you owe me $500 for the demo crew." "I don't have it," Marla said. "Ask her. She has all the money." She pointed at me. Caleb looked at me. "I don't owe you anything. Mr. Rusk," I said. "Get off my land." He spat on the ground. He got in his truck and reversed aggressively, swinging the front end dangerously close to Marla's car before peeling out. Marla got in her car. She started the engine. She rolled down the window. "You win. Ellie," she said, "you won the house. I hope you are happy alone in it." She drove away. I watched her taillights disappear down the mountain. I stood there for a long time. The sun was setting, casting long, bruised shadows across the snow. Tessa put a hand on my shoulder. "We should get that protection order," she said quietly, "just in case she comes back." I nodded. We went inside. The house was silent. The kitchen was a gaping wound of exposed pipes and torn drywall. The dust was settling on everything. I walked to the spot where Marla had sat. The chair was still pulled out. I felt empty. I had won. I had the house. I had the confession. I had stopped the theft. But as I looked around at the wreckage of my sanctuary, I realized Marla was right about one thing. I was alone in it. The cabin felt different now. It didn't feel like a retreat. It felt like a crime scene. It felt emotionally contaminated. I walked to the sink, the utility sink in the laundry room, the only one working, and washed my hands. I scrubbed them until they were red. But I couldn't wash off the feeling of her betrayal. It was in the walls now. I went back to the living room. Tessa was on the phone with the sheriff's office, arranging the paperwork for the civil protection order. I sat on the couch. I looked at the vision board Marla had made, which was still leaning against the wall where I had thrown it. "New beginnings," it said in glittery letters. I picked it up and threw it into the fireplace. I struck a match and watched it burn. The weeks following Marla's departure were characterized not by peace, but by a heavy bureaucratic silence. My cabin, once a place of refuge, had become a crime scene that I was slowly, painstakingly remediating. I hired Aspen Line Property Care to manage the transition. Reena Patel, the woman who had warned me about the council fines, proved to be worth every penny of her management fee. She arrived the day after Marla left with a locksmith and a contractor who didn't look like he belonged on a wanted poster. We walked through the kitchen together. The plastic tarp Marla had taped over the wall was peeling, fluttering in the draft like a surrender flag. "It is salvageable," the contractor, a quiet man named Elias, told me, "but we have to pull the permit for the plumbing changes she made just to close them off and inspect them. And the electrical. Well, she cut some wires she shouldn't have." "How much?" I asked, bracing myself. "To get it functional?" $3,000, Elias said. "To get it back to where it was?" $10,000? I nodded. "Do the functional repair," I said. "Seal the walls, cap the pipes, install a basic sink. I just want it safe." I spent my days on the phone, juggling a 3-ring circus of legal threats. I had to call Cabin Nest and navigate their labyrinthine fraud department to get the listing taken down. It took 5 days and 3 submissions of my passport and deed to prove that I, Ellie Griffin, did not in fact want to host a renovation retreat in my own home. Every time I opened my laptop, I felt a spike of adrenaline, expecting to see a new charge, a new account, a new disaster. I checked my credit report every morning at 9 o'clock like a religious ritual, and then the social media war began. I wasn't on the platform Marla used, the one where she had built her Marla Mindset brand, but Tessa monitored it for me. She posted, "Tessa told me over the phone one evening, read it to me," I said, staring at the fire I had built to chase away the chill of the empty house. Tessa sighed. "Okay. It is a photo of her in a cozy Airbnb in Denver. She is holding a mug, looking wistful. The caption says, 'Sometimes you have to walk away from toxic environments to protect your peace.' Survived being displaced in the dead of winter, but my spirit is unbroken. Thank you to the chosen family who stepped up when blood relatives turned their backs. Real love is unconditional. New chapter survivor. Healing. I felt a cold, hard knot form in my stomach. She is calling me toxic, I said. She forged my signature. She stole my identity. And I am the toxic one. She is controlling the narrative. Ellie, Tessa said, she knows you won't respond because you have dignity. She is banking on your silence. I didn't respond. I didn't comment. I didn't like the post. I stayed the gray rock. But my mother was not a rock. She was a conductor for Marla's electricity. Valerie called me 10 minutes after Tessa hung up. Ellie, she said, her voice trembling with that specific frequency of maternal disappointment that always made me feel 6 years old again. How could you let this happen? Let what happen? Mom, I asked, watching the snow fall outside the window. Everyone is talking, she said. Aunt Linda saw Marla's post. People are asking questions. They think you threw your sister out on the street. Marla is saying you called the police on her. I didn't call the police. I said firmly, I signed a private agreement with her. She admitted to fraud. Mom, she admitted it in writing. That is between you and her. Valerie snapped. Why did you have to make it public? I didn't make it public. I said, my voice rising. She posted it. She is the one broadcasting it to the world. Because she is hurting, Valerie cried. You humiliated her. Ellie, you stripped her of her project. You took away her dignity, and now you are letting her look like a victim. You need to fix this. You need to comment on her post and say you support her. Say it was a misunderstanding. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. No, I said. Excuse me? Valerie asked, shocked. No, I repeated. I will not lie for her. I will not validate her delusion. She committed a crime against me. I am protecting myself. If she wants to play the victim, let her. But I am not participating. Ellie, you are being cruel, Valerie said, her voice dropping to a whisper. You are destroying this family over money. The family was destroyed the minute she signed my name to a contract. I said, I hung up. I sat in the silence of the cabin, listening to the wind howl. I realized then that my mother would never see me as the victim. In her eyes, I was the strong one, the one with resources, the one who could absorb the blow. Marla was the fragile bird with the broken wing, and if the bird pecked my eyes out, it was my fault for getting too close. I blocked my mother's number for 24 hours. I needed to breathe. The next week brought a glimmer of hope, followed by a shadow. Graham Voss called me with an update on the contractor situation. Good news first, Graham said. Caleb Rusk has withdrawn his threat of a lien. Really? I asked, feeling the first true relief I had felt in days. Yes, Graham said. I sent over the packet with the affidavit of forgery and the evidence of his prior complaints. I also hinted that we were prepared to file a countersuit for slander of title. He folded. He sent a short email saying he is closing the file. He is walking away from the deposit, but he is not pursuing the labor costs. Thank God. I breathed. However, Graham continued, his tone shifting. We still have a problem with Summit Peak Home Supply, the cabinets. I said, correct. They responded to our fraud notice. Their legal department is taking a hard line. They argue that because the order was placed with a deposit from your bank account, and because the delivery address was your home, they had every reason to believe the order was valid. They are refusing to refund the deposit, and they are demanding payment for the custom materials that were already fabricated. How much? I asked. $8,000, Graham said. I closed my eyes. $8,000 for cabinets I didn't want. For a kitchen I didn't have. They said they will only release you from the contract if we can provide a police report naming the perpetrator. Graham said, or if the contractor admits in writing that he knew the signature was forged. Caleb is not going to admit that, because it implicates him. So that leaves Marla. A police report. That was the line I had drawn. I had told Marla I wouldn't file criminal charges if she left. I had signed the settlement agreement. If I file the report, she goes to jail. I said, likely. Yes, Graham said. Or at least faces felony charges. It becomes a matter of public record. I can't do that, I said. I gave her my word. Then you might have to eat the $8,000, Graham said gently. It is the cost of mercy. Ellie. I hung up. I sat at the table, staring at the checkbook. I could pay it. It would wipe out my emergency fund, the money I had saved for a real renovation one day. But I could pay it. I decided to pay it. I would pay the $8,000 to keep my sister out of prison. It was the last tax I would ever pay on being a Griffin. I was writing the check when the mail truck pulled up. I watched the carrier trudge through the snow to my mailbox. He waved, and I waved back. I walked out to get the mail. It was mostly junk. Flyers for local pizza places, and a utility bill. But at the bottom of the stack was a thick, certified envelope, Cedarstone Lending. My heart stopped. I had already dealt with Marla's loan. I knew she had defaulted. I knew she owed them $40,000. But why were they sending certified mail to me? I ripped the envelope open standing in the driveway. Notice of default and demand for payment. Sunspire Living Company / Marla Griffin, guarantor / secondary contact, Ellie Griffin. I scanned the document. My eyes blurred, then focused on a line halfway down the page. As the listed secondary guarantor on the promissory note dated August 14, 2025, you are hereby notified that the primary borrower has defaulted. August. August was 5 months ago. Marla hadn't just used my identity for the cabin renovation. She hadn't just used it for the cabin nest listing. She had used it to secure the loan in the first place. I turned the page. There was a copy of the loan agreement, and there, at the bottom, next to Marla's signature, was mine, Ellie Griffin. It was the same shaky forgery. I felt the ground tilt beneath my feet. The sky seemed to spin. She had co-signed a $40,000 high-interest loan in my name half a year ago, before she ever came to the cabin, before the separation. She had been planning this for a long time, or maybe she hadn't planned it. Maybe she had just done it, the way she did everything, assuming that if it all fell apart, I would be there to catch the pieces. I wasn't just on the hook for the cabinets. I was on the hook for her entire failed business. I walked back into the house. I felt numb. I didn't call Graham. I didn't call Tessa. I picked up my phone and called Marla. She didn't answer. It went to voicemail. I called again and again, on the 4th try. She picked up. What? She snapped. Her voice was brittle. Where are you? I asked. I am in Pinevale, she said. I am meeting a friend. Why? Are you calling to yell at me some more? Meet me. I said, I am busy. Ellie, meet me at Juniper Rail Cafe in 20 minutes, I said, or I walk into the sheriff's office with this letter from Cedarstone. There was a long silence on the other end. Fine, she whispered. Juniper Rail Cafe was neutral ground. It was busy, filled with tourists and locals, the air thick with the smell of roasted coffee and cinnamon buns. It was a place for first dates and business meetings, not for the dissection of a family betrayal. I sat at a small table in the back. I had the Cedarstone letter on the table in front of me. Face down. Marla walked in 10 minutes late. She looked good. That was the thing that always jarred me. She was wearing a stylish coat. Her hair was blown out, and she had huge sunglasses on. She looked like a successful influencer on a ski trip. She sat down opposite me, not taking off her sunglasses. Make it quick, she said. I have an appointment. I flipped the letter over. Explain this, I said. Marla looked at the letterhead. She didn't flinch. She didn't gasp. She just sighed. A long, weary sound, as if I were boring her with administrative details. Oh, that, she said. Yes, that, I said. You made me a guarantor. In August. I didn't make you a guarantor, she said, picking at a loose thread on her cuff. I put you down as a reference. There is a difference. I opened the document to the signature page. I pointed to the forgery. That is a signature. Marla. I said, that is my name. Signed by you. That makes me liable. Marla looked at the signature. She shrugged. They needed a cosigner with a credit score over 750. She said matter-of-factly, "My score took a hit after the credit card thing with Derek. I knew you had the score. I figured once the business took off, I would refinance and take you off. You would never have known. You would never have known." That was her logic, if she got away with it. It wasn't a crime. "Marla," I said, my voice shaking with suppressed rage. "It is $40,000, plus interest. They are demanding payment." "Well, I don't have it," she said. "So they are coming after me," I said. She looked at me through her dark lenses. "You can handle it. Ellie, you have savings. You have the stock. Just pay it off, and I will pay you back when I get on my feet. I promise." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had shared a room with me for 18 years. "You don't get it," I said. "It is not about the money anymore. You stole my name. You made me a partner in your failure without my consent." She took off her sunglasses then. Her eyes were hard, cold stones. "My failure," she repeated. "Is that what I am to you? A failure? You committed a crime." I said, "I did what I had to do to survive," she hissed, leaning across the table. "You don't know what it is like. Ellie, you have always been the golden child, the one with the grades, the one with the job, the one Mom brags about. I was just the pretty one, the one who was supposed to marry well. And when that fell apart, I had nothing. I tried to build something. I tried to use the Griffin name to build something. And you are going to send me to jail for it?" I sat back. "I have a choice to make," I said. "Right now," I looked at the letter. "I can file a fraud report for this loan." I said, "If I do, it triggers a criminal investigation. Because of the amount, and because it crossed state lines. You signed this in Denver. It is wire fraud. Federal, you will go to prison. Marla, not for a weekend, for years." Marla's face paled. She looked around the cafe, suddenly realizing how exposed she was. "You wouldn't," she whispered. "Mom would die." "I know," I said. Or, I continued, "I can handle it my way." I reached into my bag and pulled out a file folder Graham had prepared for me that morning. "This is an identity theft affidavit," I said. "It is a specific legal document. It states that I did not authorize this debt. I file it with the lender and the credit bureaus. It absolves me of the $40,000. "And what happens to me?" Marla asked. "If I file this? Cedarstone will pursue you for fraud," I said, "but it will be civil fraud. Initially. They will sue you. They will garnish your wages. They will bankrupt you. But they probably won't call the FBI unless you fight them." I slid the affidavit toward her. "I need you to sign this section." I said, "Admitting that you signed my name without authority, if I sign that, I admit to everything." She said, "Yes," I said, "but if you sign it, I won't call the police. I will let Cedarstone handle you. I am stepping out of the way." Marla looked at the document. She looked at me. "You are ruining me," she said. "No," I said. "I am saving myself." She picked up the pen. She stared at the paper for a long time. "I hate you," she whispered. "I know," I said. She signed it. She stood up, buttoning her coat with shaking fingers. "Don't ever contact me again," she said. I took the document. "Goodbye, Marla." She walked out of the cafe. She didn't look back. I sat there for a long time. I ordered a coffee. I drank it black. It tasted like ash. I had saved her from prison. I had shown her mercy, but I knew, deep down, she didn't see it that way. In her story, I was the villain who refused to pay her ransom. I spent the next 3 days filing the paperwork. I sent the affidavit to Cedarstone. I sent a copy to Summit Peak regarding the cabinets. It worked, because I had Marla's admission. Cedarstone removed my name from the loan. Summit Peak, seeing the pattern of fraud, agreed to drop the demand for the $8,000. Choosing instead to write it off as a loss rather than litigate, I was free. My credit was scarred, but healing. My bank accounts were secure. My house was mine again. But the victory felt hollow. I was packing up the last of my things at the cabin. I was heading back to Seattle. I needed to go back to my office, to my spreadsheets, to a world where logic still applied. I did a final walkthrough. The kitchen was boarded up, safe but ugly. The wind chimes were gone. The vision board ashes were swept from the fireplace. I locked the front door. I put the key in the lockbox, the new one, with the new code. I got in my truck. I checked my phone one last time before hitting the road. I had a voicemail. It was from a number I didn't recognize. I pressed play. Ellie. It was Marla's voice. It sounded slurry, drunk. "You think you won," she said. "You think you are so smart with your lawyers and your affidavits. You think you can just cut me off and go back to your perfect life?" There was a pause. I heard ice clinking in a glass. "Well, I have a story too. Ellie, I have a really good story. Remember that weekend in Cabo, 3 years ago? When Derek and I were on a break?" My stomach dropped. "Cabo, you think I don't know?" she whispered. "You think I didn't see the texts? I gripped the steering wheel. I had no idea what she was talking about. I had gone to Cabo with them, yes, but nothing had happened. I had spent the whole weekend reading by the pool while they fought. I am going to tell everyone," Marla said, her voice dropping to a venomous hiss. "I am going to tell Mom. I am going to tell your boss. I am going to tell the internet what you really did. You want to ruin my reputation? I will burn yours to the ground." Click, the message ended. I sat in the silence of the truck, the engine idling. What I really did. There was nothing to tell. It was a lie, another fabrication, another narrative she was inventing to justify her rage. But that was the terrifying part. Marla didn't need the truth. She just needed an audience. I looked at the cabin one last time. I had saved the structure. I had saved my finances. But the war wasn't over. My sister was out there, in the dark, armed with a lie and a smartphone. I put the truck in gear. I drove down the mountain, leaving the snow behind. But the chill stayed with me, settling deep in my bones. I had reclaimed my home, but I had the sinking feeling that I was about to lose my name. Thank you for listening to part 6 of Sister Moved into My Mountain Cabin Without Permission, Remodeled the Kitchen, and Used My Money. This story of family betrayal, financial fraud, and the struggle for boundaries is far from over. Marla has been evicted, but her final threat suggests a new, darker chapter is beginning. I would love to hear from you. Please comment below and tell me where you are listening from. I am always amazed to see how far these stories travel. Do you think Ellie made the right choice by sparing Marla from prison? Or should she have filed the full police report? Share your thoughts in English in the comments. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to Revenge Stories so you don't miss the next part, where we find out just how far Marla is willing to go to rewrite history. Thank you for your support, and until next time.